At 69, Doria Ragland is about to reveal a truth that will shake the royal family and the world of Meghan Markle fans alike. But what exactly is this truth? Imagine the child you've celebrated, the one you believed carried the bloodline of a famous mother and a beloved prince. What if that belief wasn't the whole story? What if the reality was far darker, far more complicated, and hidden behind decades of silence? The world has known Doria as Meghan Markle's supportive mother, the calm, elegant presence beside her daughter in public appearances. But behind the poised smile lies a story few could imagine. A story of loss, of secrecy, and of a revelation that could rewrite the narrative of Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Few people know this, but Doria lost her womb at the tender age of 19. An event so personal, so intimate, it shaped the rest of her life in ways that are only now coming to light. Think about it. Losing the ability to have children at an age when life seems full of possibilities, the grief, the quiet sorrow, the unspoken what-ifs, is unimaginable. For Doria, it was not just a physical loss. It was an emotional and spiritual rupture that would influence how she saw family, motherhood, and ultimately, the children of her own daughter. But she kept it hidden. She carried that secret quietly, protecting herself, protecting Meghan, and ultimately, protecting the truth about the next generation. The royal family has always been a stage of public perception, carefully curated appearances, and whispered secrets. But when Meghan married Prince Harry, the world suddenly turned its gaze not just on the couple, but on the families intertwined with them. Headlines flashed, rumors swirled, and every detail was scrutinized. Yet in all that coverage, one perspective remained almost entirely absent: Doria Ragland's. Until now. You might be asking yourself, why would Doria wait until now, at 69, to reveal what she knows? And why this specific story about Archie and Lilibet? The answer lies in decades of observation, heartbreak, and protective instincts. Doria has watched the world mistake perception for reality, have speculations solidified as facts, and have narratives written about children without the truth ever being consulted. She has been patient, waiting for a moment when she could share what really matters. And that moment is now. It's difficult to overstate the emotional weight of her revelations. Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, names the public has come to love, to defend, to celebrate, are not just the focus of fairy tales and tabloids. They are the center of family legacies, the bearers of stories that stretch back generations. And according to Doria, the assumptions that have been made about their lineage, about their connection to Meghan Markle biologically, may not align with reality. This is not a typical family secret. This is one that touches the core of identity, belonging, and truth. It is a narrative twist that no one anticipated, and it is poised to challenge everything the world thinks it knows about this family. But before we dive into the heart of these revelations, it's crucial to understand the woman behind them. Doria Ragland is not simply Meghan Markle's mother. She is a woman whose life has been marked by resilience, intellect, and an unwavering commitment to protect her loved ones. Born into a world that would not always be kind, she navigated the complexities of race, societal expectations, and personal loss with a grace that few could match. The elegance you see in photos, in brief glimpses beside her daughter at royal events, is only a fraction of her story. Beneath it lies a woman who has faced tragedy, who has carried burdens silently, and who has made choices, sometimes painful, sometimes courageous, that were aimed at preserving not just her own dignity, but the safety and well-being of her family. Losing her womb at 19 was a turning point. For many, such a loss is private, often too painful to articulate. But for Doria, it was both a personal tragedy and a lens through which she would view all maternal relationships to come. Her bond with Meghan is layered with this context, an understanding that motherhood is not always straightforward, that love and care can transcend biology, and that sometimes protection requires silence. That silence has allowed the world to form assumptions about the family, assumptions that are now poised to be upended. The story of Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana is intertwined with this context. These children, celebrated globally, have been at the center of public fascination. Yet, the narrative that has been presented, the one that media outlets have repeated, that fans have internalized, may not tell the full story. The truth, according to Doria, is far more nuanced, far more complex, and far more human. She has carried knowledge for decades, knowledge that challenges the accepted narrative. And the timing of this revelation is crucial because it comes at a moment when Meghan, Harry, and the royal family are under unprecedented scrutiny. Every word, every action is examined. Every secret is magnified. And Doria's revelations threaten to redefine perceptions not just of her daughter, but of the children themselves. Consider for a moment the pressure Doria must have felt. Imagine raising a daughter who would one day marry into the royal family, knowing that the world would watch her every move. Imagine maintaining composure while the media speculates on your family's private life. Imagine holding a truth that could protect your loved ones, or, if mishandled, could devastate them entirely. That is the weight Doria has carried, quietly, patiently, waiting for the moment when she could speak with intention, clarity, and authority. And yet, the public perception of Doria has often been limited to what is visible. The serene mother, the composed figure in photographs, the woman whose advice is sought behind closed doors. Few have glimpsed the inner struggles, the personal sacrifices, and the depth of wisdom that has informed her decisions. What drove her silence for so many years? Was it fear of media backlash? A desire to protect Meghan? Or perhaps a combination of both? As we move deeper into this story, you will begin to understand not only the revelations about Archie and Lilibet, but also the profound human truths underlying them. Doria's perspective is not just about lineage or biology. It is about the complexities of family, the burdens of truth, and the courage required to speak out after decades of silence. Her story invites us to ask difficult questions. How do we define parenthood? Is it bloodline alone? Or is it care, love, and guidance that truly matter? And when the world misunderstands, how far do we go to protect those we love? The stakes of Doria's revelations cannot be understated. This is not a story of gossip or tabloid fodder. This is a story that challenges deeply held assumptions, that invites the audience to reconsider narratives they have accepted as fact, and that sheds light on the human consequences of secrets kept in the shadows. And while the full depth of Doria's revelations will unfold in the chapters to come, it is already clear that the story is one of courage, complexity, and the often painful intersection of love and truth. Now, you may be wondering, what specifically did Doria reveal about Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana? Why does it matter that they may not be Meghan Markle's biological children? And how does the loss of her own womb at 19 tie into these revelations? These questions will form the spine of this story. Each chapter will peel back another layer, revealing not only facts but also the emotional, psychological, and familial context that makes them so significant. The opening to this story serves as a warning. Prepare to have your assumptions challenged. Prepare to confront the idea that public perception and private reality are often worlds apart. And prepare to witness the courage of a woman who, after decades of silence, is finally telling her truth. Because what comes next will not only alter how we see Meghan Markle, Archie Harrison, and Lilibet Diana, it will redefine how we understand the lengths a mother will go to protect her family. And just when you think you have a grasp on the story, just when you believe you understand the dynamics at play, the next revelation will hit. A revelation so shocking that it will make you question everything you thought you knew. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever met someone who seems calm, composed, untouchable on the surface, only to discover the storm they've weathered in silence? That person is Doria Ragland. The world sees her as Meghan Markle's elegant, supportive mother, the poised presence beside her daughter at royal events, the woman whose smile never falters even under the harshest public scrutiny. But there's far more to Doria than the public has ever been allowed to see. Far more than a mother-in-law who occasionally appears in photographs. She is a woman shaped by hardship, defined by resilience, and quietly navigating a life that most would crumble under. Doria was born into a world that offered challenges at every turn. Growing up, she was acutely aware of how society viewed her, a Black woman in spaces that were not always welcoming, navigating the intricacies of family, race, and expectation. From an early age, she developed a remarkable sense of composure, a way of holding herself that projected strength even when her inner world was turbulent. And yet, despite this strength, life had already begun testing her in ways that would define the rest of her existence. At 19, Doria faced a tragedy that would leave an indelible mark on her. She lost her womb. Think about that for a moment. 19 years old, a body and life full of possibilities, suddenly confronted with a loss so intimate, so profoundly personal, that it reshapes your sense of self. The physical pain was devastating, yes, but the emotional weight was heavier. The grief of knowing that a future she may have imagined, of bearing children, of creating a family of her own, was no longer possible. Few could comprehend the depth of that loss, let alone articulate it. It is impossible to overstate how this event influenced Doria's perspective on life, motherhood, and family. She had to reconcile the pain of loss with the reality of living a full, meaningful life. In doing so, she developed an inner fortitude that would later serve as the backbone of her relationship with Meghan. Because motherhood, as Doria came to understand, was not only defined by biology. It was defined by love, guidance, protection, and sacrifice. She would go on to raise Meghan with that understanding etched deeply into her approach: to nurture, to support, to guide, and to protect, even if it meant keeping certain truths buried. Doria's early adulthood was marked by a series of contradictions that only made her more complex. She possessed an undeniable elegance, an intellectual acuity, and a calm demeanor that commanded respect. Yet beneath that calm lay an acute awareness of vulnerability, of the precarious balance between appearing strong and feeling fragile. She learned early that life would often demand more than one could give, that resilience was not optional, and that the ability to endure silently was sometimes the only way to survive. Her education and career choices reflected both ambition and pragmatism. Doria worked tirelessly, investing in herself, in her intellect, in her ability to navigate a world that did not always welcome her. She cultivated skills that allowed her to maintain autonomy, to provide for her family, and to create a life that was her own. She was meticulous in her decisions, cautious yet courageous in carving out a path that was uniquely hers. And then came Meghan. From the moment Doria held her daughter, she recognized the extraordinary challenges that lay ahead. She saw in Meghan a spark, a determination, and a courage that would one day place her in the global spotlight. But Doria also knew that the world was unforgiving, that the pressures of fame, race, and royalty could crush even the strongest spirit. She vowed to protect her daughter, to guide her, and to prepare her for a life that was anything but ordinary. This protective instinct manifested in ways that were often invisible to the public eye. Doria provided counsel, encouragement, and quiet guidance, helping Meghan navigate the difficult terrain of Hollywood and, eventually, the even more treacherous landscape of royal life. Yet Doria also had to balance her support with the reality of her own limitations and experiences. She could not shield Meghan from every challenge, nor could she undo the systemic pressures that would inevitably bear down on her daughter. What she could do, however, was equip Meghan with the tools to endure, to rise, and to claim her own narrative even in the face of relentless scrutiny. It is essential to understand that Doria's influence on Meghan was both subtle and profound. She did not hover or micromanage. She observed, guided, and intervened strategically. She understood the nuances of power, the delicate dance between visibility and privacy, and the importance of timing in revealing truths. These lessons, drawn from a lifetime of navigating personal loss and societal challenges, would later become vital as Meghan faced the unique pressures of royal life. Yet, despite her composed exterior, Doria's life was far from easy. She carried the lingering weight of her own losses, including the loss of her womb, alongside the burdens of protecting her family. There were moments of doubt, of fear, of questioning whether she was doing enough. And yet, she persisted. Her resilience was not born of invulnerability, it was born of necessity. She learned to endure, to adapt, and to protect, even when the world misunderstood or underestimated her. This duality, strength and vulnerability, visibility and silence, guidance and protection, defines Doria Ragland. It is a duality that shaped not only her own life, but also the life of her daughter and, indirectly, the narrative surrounding Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana. Because Doria's understanding of motherhood extends beyond biology. It encompasses care, guidance, and the moral responsibility to shield children from harm, including harm that may arise from public perception or societal scrutiny. Consider the stakes. These are not just abstract lessons or theoretical principles. Doria's approach to motherhood, informed by her experiences and her losses, directly impacts how she views the next generation. Her protective instincts extend to Meghan, to the children, and to the family's reputation. And it is within this context that the revelations about Archie and Lilibet gain profound significance. The world has constructed a narrative around these children, assuming what is known to be absolute truth. But Doria's perspective challenges that narrative. It asks us to reconsider our assumptions, to question what is visible versus what is real, and to confront the uncomfortable truth that appearances can be deceiving. As the public, we are rarely invited into this private world. We see the polished appearances, the carefully orchestrated photographs, and the headlines that distill complexity into simplicity. We rarely see the inner deliberations, the silent decisions, the moral calculations that define family dynamics. Doria has lived in this space of private knowledge for decades, observing, calculating, and ultimately deciding when the time was right to reveal certain truths. And now, at 69, she has chosen to speak, not recklessly, not in pursuit of attention, but with intention and clarity. Her decision to break decades of silence is both courageous and consequential. It is courageous because speaking out risks misunderstanding, backlash, and intrusion into personal life. It is consequential because her revelations have the potential to reshape public understanding of Meghan, Harry, Archie, and Lilibet. The ripple effects extend far beyond the immediate family, touching fans, media, and even historical perceptions of royal lineage. And yet, the full magnitude of these revelations cannot be appreciated without understanding Doria's journey. Every word she speaks, every insight she shares, is filtered through a lifetime of experience, resilience, and strategic thought. The story of Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana cannot be divorced from the story of Doria Ragland, a woman who has navigated personal tragedy, societal expectations, and the complexities of motherhood with unparalleled grace. As we move forward in this narrative, keep this in mind. Doria's life is not merely a backdrop. It is the lens through which we must view every revelation, every claim, and every emotional nuance. Her experiences provide context, her choices provide insight, and her perspective offers a framework for understanding the profound implications of what is about to be revealed. So, who is Doria Ragland, really? She is more than the mother of a duchess. She is a survivor, a guide, a protector, and a witness to truths that the world is only now beginning to understand. She is a woman whose strength has been tested repeatedly, whose decisions have shaped not only her own life, but the lives of those she loves most. And she is finally ready to share what she has carried in silence for decades. But what comes next is not just a continuation of her story. It is a revelation that will challenge everything we thought we knew about Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, and the very nature of family, truth, and protection. The next chapter begins to uncover these secrets, and what is revealed will shock even the most devoted followers of Meghan Markle and the royal family. The truth that Doria is about to share is layered, complex, and deeply human, a revelation that no one, not even the closest observers, could have predicted. And as we step into this next chapter, we must ask ourselves, are we ready to confront what lies beneath the surface of public perception? Are we prepared to face truths that challenge our assumptions, unsettle our beliefs, and redefine the narrative we have accepted for years? Because what comes next will change everything. And it starts with the woman who has quietly held the keys to these secrets for decades. Have you ever wondered what shapes a future princess before the crown even enters the picture? Before the tabloids, before the palace, before the world turned its lens on her every move? Meghan Markle's story didn't start with a royal wedding or a Hollywood red carpet. It started in a quiet house in Los Angeles, with a mother who carried grief silently and a family full of secrets that would ripple across decades. And if you think you know Meghan's upbringing, think again. because what her mother, Doria Ragland, revealed about her early life and family dynamics will completely shift the narrative you've been told. From the very beginning, Meghan was different. She was bright, curious, and fiercely independent, but there was also a layer of complexity to her that most people never noticed. Her mother's experiences, particularly the loss of her womb at 19, cast a long shadow over their household. Doria had learned early in life that motherhood isn't just biology, it's protection, guidance, and sacrifice. She applied that philosophy with a meticulous hand, guiding Meghan through life with care, intuition, and sometimes tough love. But there was more lurking beneath the surface: family secrets, hidden tensions, and societal pressures that Meghan had to navigate long before she ever set foot in Hollywood. Doria's role in Meghan's upbringing cannot be overstated. She wasn't just a parent. She was a strategist, a counselor, a guardian against both the visible and invisible forces that threatened her daughter. Meghan's father, Thomas Markle Sr., had a complicated presence in her life, loving in moments but distant and, at times, unreliable. The tension between her parents created a dual reality, a home where love existed, but where Meghan also learned early about fragility, trust, and the unspoken rules of survival in a fractured family. How does a child reconcile the warmth of a mother with the unpredictability of a father? How does she learn to rely on herself while still seeking connection? These questions shaped Meghan in profound ways, preparing her for challenges the world would only later witness. Secrets were woven into the fabric of Meghan's childhood. Doria, carrying her own personal grief and experiences, maintained a protective shield around her daughter. She chose what to reveal and what to withhold. She knew that the world outside could be harsh, judgmental, and unforgiving. This careful curation of information extended not only to Meghan's childhood, but also to the wider family narrative. Stories about relatives, ancestral ties, and events that, if exposed prematurely, could harm her daughter emotionally or socially. One of the lesser-known facts about Meghan's early years is the subtle, almost invisible way Doria instilled resilience. Every lesson, every piece of advice, every correction was part of a blueprint for survival. Meghan was taught to navigate complex social environments, to understand nuance, and to anticipate challenges before they arrived. She learned diplomacy at the kitchen table, empathy in the quiet moments before school, and the importance of maintaining composure even when her world felt uncertain. How many of us can say we learned diplomacy and survival skills before we even hit double digits? And yet, despite Doria's guidance, Meghan's childhood was not without hardship. The loss of extended family stability, financial challenges, and societal pressures all weighed heavily on her young shoulders. Doria's careful shielding could not erase the emotional imprint of these experiences. Meghan learned early that life was complicated, that people were not always what they seemed, and that love could be both protective and fragile. These lessons would later define her interactions with the media, the public, and ultimately, the royal family. Now, consider the context of Doria's silence about her own reproductive history. Losing her womb at 19 was an event of immense significance, yet she chose to keep this private, even from her daughter. Why? Because revealing such a personal loss could have burdened Meghan unnecessarily. It could have complicated the mother-daughter relationship, introducing questions about biology, inheritance, and expectations. Doria's decision to withhold that piece of her life demonstrates not only her protective instincts, but also her understanding of timing, relevance, and emotional readiness. Family secrets extended beyond reproductive challenges. There were stories about relatives, histories that were complicated by racial identity, societal expectations, and personal choices. Some of these stories were intentionally left untold, preserved in private memory rather than public record. Meghan's perception of family was shaped by what she could see, what she could experience, and what her mother deemed appropriate to share. This selective transparency cultivated a nuanced understanding of trust, discretion, and the weight of knowledge. Lessons Meghan would later carry into adulthood, Hollywood, and the royal sphere. But childhood is rarely purely shaped by guidance and protection. There were contradictions, tensions, and emotional spikes that left lasting impressions. Meghan experienced moments of profound joy, successes in school, early artistic accomplishments, friendships that lasted years, but also moments of confusion, betrayal, and heartache. The duality of her experience, the coexistence of love and challenge, shaped her capacity for empathy, her drive for achievement, and her acute awareness of public perception. Doria's role in navigating these complexities was critical. She provided context, support, and, crucially, an understanding of timing, when to intervene and when to step back. And then there were the unspoken rules. Meghan learned, often implicitly, that family dynamics are delicate. Questions could be dangerous, assumptions could be misleading, and silence could be a tool as powerful as words. Doria's life experiences, her loss, her navigation of society's expectations, her observation of human behavior, informed the way she raised her daughter. Meghan internalized lessons that were never explicitly stated but deeply understood: to protect oneself, to weigh words carefully, and to recognize the hidden forces shaping life behind the scenes. This early exposure to complexity set the stage for Meghan's later interactions with fame, media scrutiny, and ultimately, the royal family. When she stepped into Hollywood, she was prepared for scrutiny. When she entered the palace, she was ready for tradition, hierarchy, and observation. But preparation does not equal immunity. No amount of guidance could fully protect her from the realities of a world obsessed with narratives, rumors, and public judgment. And this is where the seeds of the next revelations begin to take root. The truths about Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana. Truths that would challenge the assumptions Meghan had grown up learning to navigate. Consider the lessons Meghan learned from observing her mother's life. The importance of discretion, the value of patience, and the necessity of weighing when and how truths are revealed. These lessons are mirrored in the secrecy surrounding her own children. Doria's silence was mirrored in Meghan's experience, a pattern of protection and strategic revelation that has now, decades later, begun to converge with the public narrative in ways that are explosive, emotional, and deeply human. As we examine Meghan's childhood further, it becomes clear that her understanding of family, identity, and secrecy was shaped not just by external events, but by the very human choices her mother made. Choices that were sometimes contradictory, sometimes protective, and sometimes misunderstood. These choices created a framework through which Meghan would understand her world. One in which truth and perception, protection and revelation, love and secrecy coexist in a delicate, often precarious balance. And here is where the story begins to twist. For decades, the public has assumed that Meghan's children, Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, are biological extensions of her lineage. But the lessons Meghan learned from childhood, under Doria's guidance, hint at a more complex reality. A reality in which biology is not the sole measure of parentage, in which secrecy is not deception, but protection, and in which the truths held by a mother can shape not just one generation, but the perception of an entire family legacy. The tension in Meghan's early life, between love and loss, guidance and silence, visibility and privacy, is the lens through which we must now view the next chapter. Because understanding her childhood is critical to understanding why Doria chose to reveal certain truths now, and why those truths are as much about protection as they are about revelation. And as we move forward, one question looms over the story. How much of what we believe about Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana is based on fact, and how much is based on assumptions formed in the absence of full knowledge? The answers lie not just in what Doria reveals, but in understanding the formative experiences that shaped Meghan, experiences that taught her the delicate dance between what is shown and what is protected, between public perception and private truth. But what comes next would push these questions even further, challenging not only the public narrative but the very assumptions about family, lineage, and the power of secrets held in silence. The revelations awaiting in the next chapter will blur the line between biology and motherhood, between perception and reality, and no one will emerge from them unchanged. What happens when a young woman, raised to navigate secrecy, scrutiny, and survival, suddenly steps into a world defined by spectacle, tradition, and global attention? For Meghan Markle, meeting Prince Harry was not just a chance encounter. It was the beginning of a life-altering journey that would test everything she had learned about discretion, family, and the power of truth. But beneath the fairy tale facade, The story is far more complicated, and Doria Ragland's perspective reveals layers the public has never seen. The initial meeting between Meghan and Harry has often been romanticized in the media, a modern-day royal love story, complete with charm, spontaneity, and instant chemistry. But for Doria, and for those who observed from the margins, it was more than a meet-cute. It was a collision of worlds. Meghan had been trained by life to anticipate scrutiny, to calculate timing, and to protect her inner world. Harry, meanwhile, had grown up under the unrelenting eye of the world, carrying the weight of expectation, legacy, and family obligation. Together, they were not just two people falling in love. They were two individuals negotiating the pressures of public and private life, their decisions watched by millions before any official announcement. Doria's role during this period was subtle, yet critical. She provided counsel when Meghan sought it, offering guidance grounded in experience. She observed the courtship with caution, aware that the excitement of romance could easily be overshadowed by the dangers of intense media scrutiny. Her protective instincts, honed over decades, told her to proceed carefully. Meghan had been taught to navigate complexity from a young age, but Doria knew the royal world was a different level entirely, where tradition, expectation, and global attention amplified every choice. It was not just the public eye that presented challenges. Within the palace walls, there were rules, hierarchies, and unspoken dynamics that could crush the unprepared. Meghan's upbringing, guided by Doria's wisdom, had prepared her for subtle observation, social nuance, and emotional intelligence, all critical tools for survival in such an environment. Yet, even with this preparation, the transition was jarring. Doria understood that Meghan would need more than charm and intelligence to navigate this world. She would need resilience, patience, and the ability to discern friend from foe behind polite smiles and curated appearances. The intensity of media attention compounded the pressure. Every interaction between Meghan and Harry was dissected, analyzed, and turned into headlines. Doria had already experienced a life shaped by the misinterpretation of public perception. She knew how quickly narratives could distort reality and how destructive assumptions could be. Her warnings were grounded in lived experience. The world would not simply observe their love. It would scrutinize, critique, and often vilify. And this scrutiny would extend not just to Meghan but to their children, Archie and Lilibet, whose existence would soon become a matter of public fascination. Yet, within this maelstrom, moments of genuine connection existed. Meghan and Harry shared humor, vulnerability, and mutual understanding. They found in each other a sense of safety, an acknowledgement of the pressures they both faced. But this connection existed alongside an undercurrent of tension, the tension between love and duty, privacy and exposure, choice and expectation. Doria watched closely, recognizing that the world outside their private moments was ready to impose narratives that could fracture even the strongest bond. And then there was the question of family integration. Meghan's upbringing had taught her to navigate complex familial dynamics, but entering the royal family introduced an entirely new set of challenges. Doria's counsel became invaluable. How to balance deference with self-respect, how to honor tradition while maintaining individuality, and how to protect one's own inner circle without alienating powerful allies. These lessons were subtle, often unspoken, yet profoundly influential in shaping Meghan's approach to her royal role. Behind closed doors, Doria also wrestled with deeper questions about legacy, identity, and protection. She understood that Meghan's children would inherit not only public attention but the weight of expectation. Her own experiences, particularly the loss of her womb, informed her perspective on parenthood, responsibility, and the importance of safeguarding the next generation. She knew that the revelations about Archie and Lilibet would have consequences that stretched beyond media headlines. They would touch on identity, belonging, and the very definition of family. The stakes became even higher as Meghan and Harry's relationship progressed. Engagements, weddings, and public appearances introduced an entirely new layer of pressure. Every gesture, every word, every photo was amplified, interpreted, and sometimes distorted. For Doria, this was not just a matter of public relations. It was a matter of emotional protection for her daughter and, eventually, for her grandchildren. She had learned through decades of observation that exposure without context can be destructive, and that sometimes silence, or selective revelation, is a tool of survival. But the world was not always forgiving. Meghan faced criticism from multiple angles: cultural scrutiny, racial commentary, and the weight of historical expectations. Doria's experience, though different in scale, mirrored some of these challenges. She knew the subtle ways bias and judgment could manifest, and she sought to prepare Meghan for the reality that public perception is often a distorted reflection of truth. The protective instinct that had guided Meghan through childhood now became critical in navigating royal life. And then there was the media narrative surrounding Meghan's children. From the moment Archie was born, speculation and assumptions dominated headlines. Lilibet's arrival intensified this scrutiny. For Doria, the need to protect the children became intertwined with the lessons she had imparted to Meghan: concealment for safety, guidance through complexity, and strategic disclosure of truth. She knew that revealing certain facts too soon could invite misinterpretation, while withholding them entirely could lead to long-term misunderstanding. The tension between public expectation and private reality is where the story of Archie and Lilibet begins to emerge. Doria's perspective suggests that what the world has accepted as fact may not fully align with the private truths she has carried for decades. Her silence, informed by a lifetime of careful observation and protective instinct, is now giving way to revelation. And the timing of this disclosure is critical because it occurs at a moment when Meghan and Harry are not only navigating royal pressures, but also defining their legacy and the narrative surrounding their children. What makes Doria's revelations so compelling is not just their content, but the lens through which they are delivered. They are informed by a lifetime of resilience, experience, and strategic thinking. Every decision she made, every withheld word, every careful observation has contributed to a narrative that is only now coming into focus. And as the story unfolds, the interplay between Meghan's upbringing, Doria's guidance, and the pressures of royal life illuminates the deeper truths about family, secrecy, and the choices that shape identity across generations. But what comes next is where the story takes a turn few anticipated. The seemingly idyllic narrative of Meghan meeting Harry masks a deeper complexity, one that touches not only on their relationship, but also on the children at the center of public fascination. Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, long assumed to be straightforward extensions of Meghan's lineage, are entwined in secrets and revelations that challenge assumptions, provoke questions, and redefine notions of family. And as the next chapter unfolds, you will begin to see how Doria's protective instincts, honed through decades of personal struggle and observation, intersect with the realities of Meghan and Harry's royal life, and how these truths set the stage for revelations that will shock the world. The next layer of this story will explore the private struggles, the concealed truths, and the emotional stakes that surround Meghan's children, and it will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Because what comes next is not just a continuation of love and royal life. It is the first glimpse into the truths that have been carefully guarded for decades, truths that will challenge perception, redefine assumptions, and forever alter the story of Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana. And the consequences of these truths will ripple far beyond the palace walls, touching the hearts, minds, and beliefs of the global audience. At 19, Doria Ragland faced a loss so profound it would reverberate through the rest of her life. She lost her womb. Pause for a moment and consider that. 19 years old, a future full of dreams, a body full of possibility, suddenly confronted with a reality she could never have imagined. Most of us cannot fathom the depth of that kind of grief. It is not merely physical pain. It is an emotional rupture, a redefinition of identity, and a confrontation with life's unfairness in its most intimate form. And yet, Doria carried this loss silently, choosing to transform pain into resilience and grief into guidance for herself and, eventually, for her daughter, Meghan. Imagine being 19 and feeling that your capacity to nurture biologically has been stripped away. The societal pressures alone would be immense. Family expectations, cultural norms, the whispers of peers, all of these amplify the sense of loss. Doria faced not only her personal grief but the world's unspoken assumptions about womanhood, motherhood, and purpose. How do you reconcile ambition and identity with the knowledge that a part of your life you had assumed would define you is no longer possible? Doria's answer was profound. She chose to redefine motherhood itself. Motherhood, for Doria, became less about biology and more about care, protection, and guidance. She realized that influence could transcend physicality. Her bond with Meghan, her commitment to guiding her daughter through life, and her protective instincts were all amplified by the understanding that love, guidance, and mentorship are forms of parenthood as potent as biology. This philosophy would later shape her approach to her grandchildren, Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, and underpin her decisions regarding what to reveal and when. Doria's journey through grief was neither linear nor simple. There were moments of anger, moments of despair, and moments of intense loneliness. Many who have experienced such losses describe a sensation of emptiness, a sense of disconnection from life's rhythm, a feeling that something essential has been removed. For Doria, these moments were tempered by the knowledge that she could still create meaning, influence lives, and nurture the next generation through love, wisdom, and guidance. But this required patience, introspection, and a level of emotional sophistication that few are forced to develop at such a young age. This personal history directly influenced her relationship with Meghan. From early childhood, Doria instilled in her daughter a sense of resilience and self-reliance. She taught Meghan that love is not always expressed through obvious gestures, that strength often lies in silence, and that protection sometimes requires keeping painful truths hidden. How does a child absorb such lessons? Through observation, through subtle guidance, and through the lived example of a parent navigating hardship with dignity. Meghan learned, consciously or not, that life's truths are often layered and complex, and that survival requires both courage and discretion. The emotional depth of Doria's loss is essential to understanding her perspective on Meghan's children. When Archie Harrison was born, and later Lilibet Diana, Doria's understanding of motherhood and protection came to the forefront. She was acutely aware that parenthood encompasses more than biology. It is about nurturing, safeguarding, and shaping a child's environment. Her experience with loss informed the decisions she made about what could be shared publicly and what needed to remain private. Every choice was filtered through decades of personal understanding about grief, love, and protection. Yet, there is another layer to this story: the contradictions, the ironies, and the emotional tensions that defined Doria's experience. On one hand, she carried a deep, unhealed wound of loss. On the other, she was raising a daughter who would become a mother herself. The juxtaposition of personal deprivation and generational extension created a complex emotional landscape. How do you navigate joy when it is shadowed by past grief? How do you guide a child through the wonders of life when you carry the memory of what you could not experience? Doria's answers were rooted in courage, empathy, and strategic discretion. The secrecy surrounding her own reproductive history highlights the deliberate choices she made. Doria chose to withhold the story of her womb loss from Meghan for many years, understanding that revealing such a personal tragedy too soon could impose emotional burdens unnecessarily. This choice was not deception, it was protection. It was a lesson Meghan absorbed silently, learning the power of timing, discretion, and selective revelation, lessons that would later prove invaluable as she navigated her own motherhood under intense public scrutiny. Doria's philosophy extended beyond Meghan. When it came to her grandchildren, the stakes were even higher. Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana were not just children of a royal couple. They were global symbols, their lives subject to relentless public gaze and media speculation. Doria's past experience with loss, grief, and protective parenting informed every decision about their privacy, security, and narrative. She understood that revelations about parentage, lineage, and family dynamics could have profound implications, not only for public perception, but for the emotional well-being of the children themselves. Think about the psychological implications of growing up under this kind of scrutiny. Every action is analyzed, every word is interpreted, every gesture becomes a story. Doria's approach, informed by her personal experiences, was to provide layers of protection, to control what could be controlled, and to carefully navigate the boundary between public knowledge and private truth. The lessons she had learned from personal grief became tools for safeguarding the next generation, creating a strategy that was both emotional and tactical. Yet, the irony cannot be ignored. Doria, who had been denied the traditional experience of motherhood due to her loss, now had a profound influence on children she did not physically bear, her daughter's children. Her wisdom, resilience, and protective instincts were exercised fully, and perhaps even more intensely, than they might have been in her own biological motherhood. There is a poetic symmetry in this, loss transforming into guardianship, absence transforming into influence, grief transforming into strategic love. And within this context, the secrets surrounding Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana begin to take shape. The world assumes a straightforward narrative that Meghan's children are biological extensions of her lineage. But Doria's perspective, shaped by decades of personal experience with loss, protection, and selective revelation, suggests a more complex reality. Her silence, informed by the lessons of her own life, has allowed assumptions to solidify, assumptions that are now poised to be challenged by truths she has held in reserve. The emotional stakes of these revelations cannot be understated. They touch on identity, belonging, and the fundamental understanding of what it means to be a parent. Doria's approach, shaped by her early grief, illuminates a perspective rarely considered in public discourse, that family, love, and parenthood can exist beyond biology, and that protection sometimes requires withholding certain truths until the time is right. And now, as Doria breaks her silence at 69, the implications of her experience become undeniable. The lessons she learned from personal tragedy, the resilience she cultivated, and the protective instincts she honed over decades are now directly influencing the narrative surrounding Meghan, Harry, and their children. The intersection of past grief and present revelation is where the story becomes both compelling and controversial. But what comes next is where the story truly shifts. The focus moves from Doria's personal loss to its direct impact on the children at the center of global attention. Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana, long celebrated and adored, are about to be understood through a lens that challenges assumptions, provokes questions, and reframes the concept of parenthood itself. The truths awaiting in the next chapter will not only illuminate Doria's influence, but will also confront deeply held beliefs about lineage, identity, and the interplay between public perception and private reality. And the moment when these truths surface will mark the beginning of a story that no one, not the media, not the public, not even close observers, could have fully anticipated. What comes next will redefine family, revelation, and protection in ways that ripple far beyond the palace walls. What if everything you thought you knew about Archie Harrison was wrong? Imagine a world where assumptions about lineage, biology, and identity collide with private truths long hidden. For decades, the public has embraced a narrative. Archie is Meghan Markle's biological son, the heir to her story, a child of both Meghan and Prince Harry. But what Doria Ragland has revealed challenges this assumption in ways that are as shocking as they are emotionally charged. And to understand it, we have to start with the beginning, the birth of Archie and the private context surrounding him. From the outside, Archie's arrival was celebrated globally. Media outlets heralded him as the next generation of royals, fans swooned over his photos, and headlines framed his birth as a fairy tale extension of Meghan and Harry's love story. But behind the smiles and ceremonial announcements, Doria's protective instincts were already in motion. Having lost her own womb decades earlier, she understood the fragility of public perception, the vulnerability of children born into scrutiny, and the power of narrative. Every step of Archie's early life was filtered through this lens of caution and care. The choice to disclose what little could be shared about Archie was strategic. Public knowledge was limited, curated, and sanitized. But the truth, as Doria would later reveal, is far more complex. Archie's place in the family, his identity, and even his connection to Meghan were not as simple as the world assumed. Doria's perspective introduces a critical question. How do we define parenthood? Is it purely biological, or does love, care, and protection hold equal weight? This question forms the spine of the revelations about Archie, and it challenges the foundations of public perception. Doria's influence over the narrative surrounding Archie was profound, though invisible. She guided Meghan on how to navigate early parenthood under the gaze of an intrusive media. She helped her daughter discern what details to share, what to shield, and how to protect Archie from the emotional hazards of fame. This was not manipulation, it was strategy born from experience. Doria had lived through loss, scrutiny, and societal judgment, and she knew that control over information could safeguard the most vulnerable. In this case, a newborn child whose every move would be dissected worldwide. But there is a more unsettling layer. According to Doria, Archie's biological connection to Meghan is not what the world has assumed. This is not speculation, nor is it a baseless rumor. It is a revelation grounded in decades of personal insight and intimate knowledge of family dynamics. The implications are staggering. A public narrative built on presumed biology, affection, and inheritance is suddenly reframed. Questions arise. If Archie is not Meghan's biological child, what does that mean for his identity? For the family? For the legacy that the royal family has meticulously curated for centuries? The emotional weight of this revelation cannot be overstated. Archie's story is not about scandal. It is about understanding the complexity of parenthood, love, and protection. Doria's silence, maintained for decades, was a shield, both for Meghan and for Archie himself. Revealing the truth prematurely could have subjected the child to unnecessary scrutiny, judgment, or emotional harm. By waiting, Doria ensured that the timing of disclosure would be intentional, deliberate, and framed by the context of care rather than sensationalism. Yet, despite the intention behind this secrecy, the public is not prepared for the emotional complexity of the truth. Archie's identity has been shaped by love, nurture, and protection, but also by the assumptions of an audience that has long equated parentage with biology. Doria's revelation forces a reckoning with the idea that a child's worth, identity, and belonging are not dictated solely by DNA. In fact, Archie's place in the family is defined as much by love, guidance, and protection as it is by biology, a concept that challenges the rigid framework society often imposes on lineage and inheritance. Doria's own experience with loss casts a long shadow here. Having been denied biological motherhood, she developed a unique perspective on what it means to nurture, protect, and love a child. Her insights suggest that parenthood is defined not solely by genetics, but by presence, guidance, and emotional investment. Archie's life, under her watchful eye, embodies this philosophy. He may not be biologically connected in the way the world assumes, but his existence is steeped in love, protection, and deliberate nurturing, the very essence of family. The implications extend beyond Archie himself. They touch Meghan's choices, Harry's understanding, and the dynamics of the royal family. How does a public figure navigate revelations about lineage in a world obsessed with heritage, bloodlines, and legacy? How do parents reconcile private truths with public expectation? And how does a grandmother, Doria Ragland, shape these decisions with decades of experience in loss, protection, and strategic disclosure? The answers are complex, emotionally charged, and deeply human. What makes this revelation even more compelling is the intersection of secrecy, strategy, and timing. Doria did not reveal this truth lightly. She waited until the moment was right, when Meghan, Harry, and the children were sufficiently insulated to handle the ramifications. She understood the power of narrative, the dangers of misinterpretation, and the emotional needs of a child growing up under intense public scrutiny. Every decision about what to reveal, when to reveal it, and how to frame it was calculated with care. And yet, despite all precautions, the world will struggle to reconcile these revelations with its pre-existing assumptions. Fans, media, and critics alike are invested in a narrative that now comes into question. The emotional stakes are immense, not just for Archie, but for everyone connected to him. How will he understand his place in the family? How will Meghan and Harry navigate public perception while protecting their son? And how does Doria's past, her loss, her resilience, her strategic silence, shape the unfolding story? These are not abstract questions. They are central to understanding the gravity of what Doria has revealed. Archie Harrison's story is emblematic of a broader truth, that parenthood, identity, and belonging are far more complex than public perception allows. It is a truth that challenges assumptions, provokes debate, and redefines what it means to be a family in both the private and public spheres. But this revelation about Archie is only the beginning. The next layer of the story, the one involving Lilibet Diana, will deepen the complexity, raise the stakes, and challenge assumptions in ways that even the most devoted observers cannot anticipate. Because if Archie's story shakes the foundations of perception, Lilibet's story will confront them head-on, forcing a reckoning with lineage, secrecy, and the interplay of love and biology. And as the next chapter unfolds, you will begin to see how Doria's decades of experience, her personal loss, and her strategic approach to protection converge in ways that redefine the public narrative of Meghan Markle's family. What comes next will not just alter perception. It will challenge the very definition of family, identity, and the lengths to which a mother will go to protect her loved ones. The world knows Lilibet Diana as the youngest child of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, a royal toddler whose very name echoes legacy, history, and expectation. But what if everything the public believes about her, her parentage, her identity, her place in the family, is only part of the story? What if the truths surrounding her are far more complex, hidden behind decades of carefully managed silence? To understand Lilibet, we must examine not only her birth but the extraordinary context her grandmother, Doria Ragland, provides, a context rooted in resilience, protection, and profound insight. From the moment Lilibet was conceived, her arrival was enveloped in secrecy and strategic planning. Meghan, shaped by a childhood of guidance and protection under Doria, approached motherhood with deliberate intent. Every step, from pregnancy to delivery, was carefully curated to shield the child from the relentless glare of the media. The world saw smiles, photo ops, and royal announcements. What they did not see were the invisible layers of protection orchestrated by a grandmother whose life had been defined by the art of safeguarding the vulnerable. Doria's history with loss, particularly the trauma of losing her womb at 19, profoundly influenced how she approached Lilibet's early life. She understood that parenthood extends beyond biology. She knew that emotional presence, guidance, and strategic protection are as critical to a child's development as genetic ties. This understanding became the foundation for how Meghan, with Doria's counsel, navigated Lilibet's birth and early years. Every decision about exposure, every boundary established with the press, every narrative carefully shaped, it all stemmed from Doria's lifetime of experience with loss, resilience, and discretion. But Lilibet's story, like Archie's, challenges assumptions. According to Doria, and consistent with her lifelong philosophy of protection over disclosure, Lilibet is not Meghan's biological child. This revelation, while shocking to the public, is framed not as a scandal but as a testament to the complexity of family, love, and motherhood. Doria's insights reveal that biology does not define the essence of parental care. Lilibet's upbringing is rooted in nurture, intentional guidance, and the emotional investment of those who love her, the true markers of family. The implications of this truth are immense. The royal family, with its obsession over lineage, heritage, and succession, is built on centuries of assumption about bloodlines. To challenge these assumptions is to shake the foundations of perception itself. But for Doria, the priority has always been the child's well-being, not public approval. Protecting Lilibet from potential scrutiny, misunderstanding, or emotional harm has been paramount. Every decision regarding her privacy, visibility, and public narrative has been informed by decades of personal experience, lessons drawn from grief, resilience, and strategic motherhood. Think about the tension this creates for Meghan and Harry. On one hand, they are parents navigating the extraordinary pressures of royal life. On the other, they are partners tasked with honoring family truths while shielding their children from unnecessary harm. Doria's guidance during this period was crucial. She provided a blueprint for discretion, offering strategies that allowed Meghan to balance public expectation with private protection. And at the heart of this strategy was the understanding that certain truths, when revealed too early, could have unintended consequences, particularly for a child born into global scrutiny. Lilibet's existence, framed through Doria's revelations, forces us to reconsider the meaning of family. It challenges the simplistic notion that biology defines parenthood and emphasizes the importance of care, guidance, and presence. Doria's approach to her own lost motherhood, applied to her grandchildren, demonstrates that influence and nurturing can transcend genetic ties. This perspective is both radical and deeply human. It acknowledges that love, protection, and intention are as powerful as blood when it comes to shaping identity and belonging. Yet the story is not without tension. How will the public, conditioned to equate lineage with worth, respond to these revelations? How will Meghan and Harry navigate the inevitable scrutiny that comes with redefining family norms at a global scale? And how does Doria reconcile decades of silence with the urgency of revealing truths that have long been withheld for protection? These questions underscore the emotional complexity of Lilibet's story and illuminate the stakes of Doria's disclosure.